Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's a 7:06, O'Connor and Company, Friday morning in your nation's capital. Thanks for finishing up your week with us and letting us into your morning routine. Coming up at 7:35, Stephanie Turner is that female fencer who refused to compete against a transgender athlete, and she's now being punished. She'll tell her story. At 8:05, Byron York, Washington Examiner. And at 8:35, Amanda Chase running for governor in Virginia. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka.
Good morning. Happy Friday, Larry.
Back at you. Ryan Young is a senior economist at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and it's been a busy week for him because of the announced tariffs against multiple nations around the world. Ryan Young, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess the primary thesis here that's being promoted by the Trump administration and by others who agree with him is that this whole, World Trade Organization, most favored nation status for China and other countries, it hasn't worked out the way we were promised. We've lost all of our manufacturing here in this country. It's gone offshore. We're now beholden to China and other countries, and this exposes us, number one, economically, but also potentially if there's a crisis in this country, like the COVID-19 pandemic, we're not capable of ramping up and manufacturing what we need to get through that. So we need a correction here, and our companies have been taken, or excuse me, our country has been taken advantage of because those countries have tariffs against us. So what's wrong with that statement?
Well, it's a lot of objectives, and not all of them are compatible with one another. To take your manufacturing point, U.S. manufacturing output, how much stuff do American factories make? That didn't hit its all-time high in the 1950s when the big three automakers ruled the world. It didn't hit its all-time high in 1979, which is when manufacturing employment peaked at nearly 20 million workers. We're down to under 13 million now. Total U.S. manufacturing output hit its peak of all time in September of 2018, right about when President Trump's first-term tariffs took effect. It's been fighting back since. It took another hit due to COVID, but the patient is actually surprisingly healthy. American factories make more output than Germany, Japan, and South Korea combined. So while there's always room for improvement, U.S. manufacturing hasn't been hollowed out, hasn't been devastated. American factories are actually pretty close to their all-time record output.
Can you give me, just in terms of broad strokes, what industries you're describing there? Because, the stories of gutted out towns all through the Midwest, all through the Rust Belt, of major manufacturing sectors that have just disappeared, as well as textiles down in the Carolinas, et cetera. There's a ton of, ghost towns now that used to be major manufacturing hubs. So when you say manufacturing hit our this great high, what exactly were we manufacturing? Where?
Cars, appliances, all kinds of goods, also capital equipment that other countries use. And also, what caused the hollowing out of those towns? A lot of it was technological change and automation. Those two things are responsible for about 6 times as much job churn as international trade. So if your goal is to revive those dying towns, the culprit's not trade. Any argument you make against trade, you have to make 6 times as strongly against technology, and very few people are doing that.
So, Ryan, we just saw announced China is imposing a reciprocal tariff of 34% on all goods, and so coming from the United States. And so you talk a little bit about trade wars, but interestingly, we saw Israel respond to its tariffs by dropping all of the tariffs that they had against U.S. goods. Is it possible that we'll see? How do you see this shaking out? Will countries continue to lower or at least match the levels of trade tariffs that we have? Will they eliminate the tariffs altogether and potentially open up, their economies to other products that so far have not been able to come in from the United States?
Well, that's what I'd like to see, and my worry is that we'll see more and more retaliations like China's done. The only way to win a trade war is not to play. That is a lesson that I hope a lot of countries learn. Israel seems to have learned that lesson. President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico said that Mexico might take a few measures, but they will likely not be raising tariffs. China's raising theirs as of April 10, as we saw. Canada's likely going to take some actions against the U.S. regarding tariffs. So it's a mixed bag. Some countries are learning that escalation is bad. It's bad for them. It's bad for the U.S. The only way to win a trade war is not to play. So it's heartening to see that at least a few countries like Israel and Mexico and hopefully others are learning that lesson.
What do you say to people who say, listen, Donald Trump is not starting a trade war. This trade war was already started against us. We're just responding. I mean, if tariffs don't work, then why is it all these other countries have tariffs on our goods?
Well, I might wonder then why the U.S. actually has higher tariffs, not just now, but even before Wednesday's announcement, than many of our rivals. We had higher tariffs against Canada than Canada had against us, ditto with Europe and a few other places. Tariffs had already doubled since 2018, and then with the reciprocal tariffs, those actually weren't calculated regarding to tariffs. They were calculated regarding trade deficits, which are not a trade barrier. That's just the sum of individual decisions about whether to buy or sell goods. So the reciprocal tariffs, he uses that word, but he doesn't seem to use it in a way that most people have it mean.
You know, Ryan, when you consider the tariffs from the Trump 1.0 administration, folks will say they didn't feel the impact on the day-to-day basis. I mean, because they were targeted at certain industries like aluminum, steel, maybe lumber, I think. So it didn't seem like there was a measurable increase in both the consumer price index, which is, how people typically think of the inflation rate, and broadly, just in general, compared to the past 4 years of inflationary monetary and fiscal policy that has driven prices over 20% higher. So do you think that some of the concern that we're seeing with the stock market and even just recessionary fears are really that, prices are going to increase, but people are very price sensitive right now, and that maybe are the fears overblown is what I'm getting at, because people didn't feel the tariffs in the previous administration, and maybe they might not feel them as much this time around?
That's a really good question. Last time around, the tariffs were smaller, and they also tended to target not so much consumer goods, but inputs. So you raised the price of steel with steel tariffs, and you raised the price of autos. Car prices went up in the first term $250, $300 per car. That's not enough to show up in the consumer price index. This round of tariffs were directly on the cars themselves, as well as the metals tariffs. We're going to see car prices go up by $3,000 to $10,000, depending on a car's components. That is a lot of money for most families, and that is going to change the decisions that they make. So this time around is much bigger, and it's also much more direct. So there are two reasons why this round of tariffs is going to be much more felt.
How do you respond to the argument that the cost of items has been grossly sort of underplayed with regard to the poor work conditions in China, what some would describe as close to slave labor? We've been able to exploit that labor through the communist regime in Beijing, so that our electronics and textiles and other items that we rely on for low cost at your major stores, we've basically helped exploit these workers in China and helped fund the communist regime. And that's not good national security policy or foreign policy, and frankly, not good humanitarian policy.
Yeah, I agree with that on all counts. Beijing, let's not mince words, is an evil government. They need to make changes on their human rights records. They're bad trading partners. They steal intellectual property. They insist on state control and even expropriate foreign investments. Are tariffs going to make them change? I think we found that the answer to that is no. That's what President Trump's first-term China tariffs were all about. And in response, Beijing didn't reform. They retaliated. So Trump tried a
they unleashed a virus on the world. No, but to be fair, I understand. Will tariffs work? Well, I don't know, but I know that removing those tariffs, admitting them to the World Trade Organization, giving them most favored trading partner status, that seemed to make things worse.
I don't know about that. The U.S. labor force has grown by more than 30 million workers since China was admitted to the WTO. Our living standards are up across the board.
No, I'm talking about the conditions in China. in China. I mean, by giving them all of those gifts and turning them into the manufacturing and economic powerhouse of the world, it's allowed them not only to build up their military on the backs of all of that cheap labor that they're then selling back to us at a premium, but it's also exacerbated the problem for the people in China. You just said, you're right, they're a bad trade partner, they have humanitarian violations, this is bad. Well, then why did we give them all of those gifts? We assumed that would make them change. It didn't. It actually made things worse.
Yeah, and part of that is because the World Trade Organization has two sets of rules. It has a stricter set for developed countries and then a more lenient set for poorer countries, so they can remain more protectionist. And I think it was a big mistake putting China in that second tier with more lenient rules so they could maintain a lot of their high and unfair trade barriers. It never should have happened. But our tariffs could have fixed that, I'm pretty sure, after 7 rounds of tariffs now, and Beijing making not a single substantive reform in response. You just look at other avenues besides tariffs.
We're starting to lose your connection there, and it's actually right when we're overdue anyway. But Ryan Young, we could talk about this. This is a major topic, and we wanted to make sure all sides had a voice here. That's a senior economist for CEI, Competitive Enterprise Institute. I would just tag on there that I think that a lot of people are frustrated with these world organizations and, the WTO. Well, the problem is WTO. That's why these are the same people like the World Health Organization who, we feel handcuffed and frankly deceived by a lot of these world organizations after the pandemic. And it's time for the U.S. to sort of step up and take matters into our own hands, I guess. Whether this is the right way to do it or not, Patrice, I guess is the
We'll
debate.
see. Yeah.
We will definitely see. It's 7:18, so let's get straight to Jamie Whitten. Sorry, we're a little late there, but it's such an important topic, Jamie. In the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
News is brought to you by Baird Financial.
All right, yesterday, Joe Scarborough adding to the book tour that Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes are doing on this book where, now it can be told Biden had cognitive problems. No, we were saying it then, but here's Joe Scarborough, cut 16, with his shocking revelation.
We always look back in retrospect and think things were a certain way just because it's the way the media at the time defined it. I remember after Biden's shockingly bad presidential debate, that's when the history books were starting, you could just see that was going to be the reason why he was pushed out of the race and he was doing badly.
Can I just tell you, 2 months before that shocking debate performance, this was that very same Joe Scarborough. This is cut 17.
He's cogent, but I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
Now you've got Joe Scarborough. And my favorite part of that cut that we just heard from yesterday morning is he's saying, looking back in retrospect, we have a different perspective. But at the time, this is how the media talks about it. You are the media, pal.
Bingo.
You're
Bingo.
the first word on MSNBC. You set the table for the media conversation of the elites in New York and D.C. And he's like, I don't know how we all thought that Joe Biden was doing well. It's because of him.
Listen, if there had not been a poor performance during the debate, Joe Biden would not have been removed from the ticket. There would not have been a replacement. They were more than happy to go along with this cover-up because Joe Biden was serving their purposes, and he had 4 years of lots of spending and ideological partisan policies. They were caught with their pants down. First, he was caught with his pants down on stage in front of everyone, and now they were caught because they had been defending him. They were the ones who were saying, I've been in meetings with him. I've seen him up close and personal. I know that he's cogent. I know him, and this is the same old Joe he's always been, and he's ready to roll. So spare me, Joe. Spare me, Mika, and every other liberal, because that's what they are. They are an arm of the liberal. They're liberal, and they're the arm of the Democratic Party, trying to make a part of a cover-up, and now they're trying to back out of it as though their hands are clean. No, your hands are just as dirty as everybody else.
Byron York just
Sorry.
wrote about all of this rear view mirror gazing and this over your shoulder. In retrospect, maybe Joe Biden wasn't fit. We're going to talk to Byron York about that at 8:05. Also, by the way, just so you know, Joe Biden got caught with his pants down in various other situations that go well beyond what you just described.
Metaphorically.
That we shouldn't talk about here on the program. One other thing, and you nailed it. This is the important point for everybody to take away, because you're seeing the rewriting of history here with this book that's out here. It's like, oh, now we can say it turns out Joe Biden wasn't fit. You nailed it, Patrice. Joe Biden was not forced off of the ticket because the Democrats thought that he was incapable of being president. He got forced off the ticket because Democrats thought he was incapable of winning.
Yes.
That's why they moved him off. 7:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:37. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company. 8:05, we'll talk to Byron York of Washington Examiner, and then 8:35, Amanda Chase running for governor in Virginia. Larry O'Connor here with Patrice Onwuka this Friday morning in your nation's capital. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Thank you for that. Joining us right now, we told you the story yesterday. Real heroic move by Stephanie Turner, a female fencer who, during a women's fencing competition at the University of Maryland, right here in our backyard, was up against a biological male who was presenting as a female. This is a person who used to compete in male fencing and now suddenly, a year later, is in the female category. And Ms. Turner refused to compete, took a knee, and now she's being punished by the Oversight USA Fencing organization. She joins us now. Ms. Turner, thank you for joining us to tell your story, and thank you for this very heroic move.
Thank you for having me.
So first, I think, listen, we're not super familiar with fencing in this country, as you know. So
Yep.
why is there a difference between male fencing and female fencing? Because it doesn't seem like a contact sport necessarily, right?
Right. Well, fencing is still a combat sport, and so there's important aspects like distance control and power, speed, reaction time, and height. So height and wingspan and muscle mass, those all make a huge difference in whether you're going to be successful in a bout.
So there are inherent biological advantages that the male physique has over a female physique.
Absolutely. If you actually look at the higher levels of foil fencing, you will see those differences even more exaggerated between the men and the women. The men, on average, are like a tall man, or an average man, and maybe a men's foil would be like about 6'1" or something like that, and then the average woman would be a little bit more around my height, or a tall average for my height would be about 5'7". And the difference is going to be like whether you can attack from a longer distance, how easy it is going to be for somebody to break into your distance. And then on top of that, men are much broader and bigger and more powerful with their upper bodies. So when you're competing against a man, it feels almost like a tank is coming at you. And psychologically, you just go into a defense mode, a flight mode, and you're not even considering technique anymore. Yeah.
You know, Stephanie, so talking about what happened with you, USA Fencing is saying their decision meets or adheres to International Fencing Federation rules that says that if you refuse to face another properly entered fencer, then you can get a black card and a disqualification.
Yeah.
It so happens I work with independent women, and we've been one of those leading champions forcing a lot of these sports bodies to change their rules to really reflect the differences between men and women and to protect women's sports. Where do you think the fight needs to go now? Does it need to go to the International Fencing Federation if it's the case that the USA is saying, no, we're our hands are tied, we're looking at the international body?
It's really difficult right now because the authoritative body of the USFA is basically being run by extremists who aren't listening to the greater athletic body or to logic and science, to be honest. They're basically holding us all hostage to this idea, and whenever you try to speak about this, they just defer you to the policy and just say they're in line with the policy, even though the policy is wrong. The FIE, which is our international body, they haven't exactly ruled on this. but I don't know if it's going to, I want to wait until they make any sort of decision. I want this resolved in the U.S. Yesterday.
Yeah.
So
we're speaking with Stephanie Turner. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie. Finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. It might take a few resignations, honestly, from some of these people who have been taking these extremist positions at the expense of women, or it might take litigation. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a reason why there's a women's fencing and a men's fencing, and for the people in charge of women's fencing to say, yeah, it's okay for this to happen, it seems like they're undermining the whole reason for women's fencing. This is Stephanie Turner. You know her story. And Stephanie, it's been 48 hours now, and I got to say I'm a little surprised and disheartened that I haven't seen other women fencers, other females stepping forward and saying, I stand with Stephanie, or I kneel with Stephanie for that matter. What have you been hearing from your colleagues?
So privately, a lot of people have reached out to me. I even get like fan mail from other fencers or from people who are just interested in the situation, and they send it to my club. But a lot of people are deeply afraid to come forward because there's a lot on the line. Not a lot of people know this, but fencing is one of the greatest gateways to get into the Ivy Leagues. I think it even favors being a fencer is even more favored than having legacy. So a lot of people need support to get into Harvard, Columbia, UPenn, and sometimes people are afraid because it only takes like one really good tournament before you get seen by a recruiter, and you don't know if the tournament that you're going to be taking a knee in is going to be that tournament that changes your whole trajectory, competition trajectory, and whether you get admitted or not. And then on top of that, the authorities that are on this extremist side of things. So you could take a knee, and then a recruiter could just look away from you, and you might not get accepted. So you'd risk so much, and all these girls are trying to do is just keep their heads down, get into college, and they don't want the trouble. And you've seen already like what happens to me. I mean, they still are pending my investigation. The results of my investigation are still pending. It's not out of the realm of consideration that I might end up suspended for a time. That's a huge risk for a lot of these girls. And it also costs a lot of money. It doesn't matter whether you're brand new or you've been doing this for years and you're really good. If you're fencing, you're spending money. So it can cost a lot of money to do this.
Very quickly, do you know about the opponent that you declined to compete against? Is this person been doing this for quite some time in the women's side, or is this kind of a new transition over into the women's league? And have they harmed other women, or have you heard of stories where other women were hurt because of the aggressive, just natural physical differences?
No, I believe he's brand new to both, just to fencing in general, and maybe had only done about a year or so of the men's and then switched over to the women's. I have heard tale of some women who have gotten concussions, at least in Sabre, when fencing transgender opponents, but that's little known and was informed to me privately by authorities within the USFA who do not agree with this. There are people who exist in the authoritative body who are very much trying to fight this, and they are meeting dead end after dead end because, again, the people who are extremists just keep pointing to the same policy and just say, well, it's in place and we don't really want to talk about it. So you have pretty much no option going forward.
Two quick items here, Stephanie, that I want to get to because this is too important a conversation and I want to get it in right now. Number one, Associated Press and CBS News, they have a headline this morning. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll read it to you. U.S. fencing disqualified a fencer from a women's tournament in Maryland after she refused to face an opponent whom she says is transgender. And like it's your opinion. Like there's no objective fact here. I'd love for you to respond to that.
Well, that's the crazy thing about today is I have eyes, I have ears, and I can tell the difference between a man and a woman. And to be honest, and also, and this person was also competing in the men's league. So it's
in the men's, right? Well, who know? How do you know, Stephanie? Could have been a woman presenting as a man back then. Yeah. Oh, it's outrageous.
And to be honest, I like to say the word man because I actually don't know whether he identifies as a trans woman or as non-binary or as demigirl or as gender fluid, whatever. So it doesn't, I mean, that's the thing that I'm not going to be sure. I mean, he could identify as a trans woman the first 12 hours of the day, and then the next 12 hours is non-binary. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it doesn't.
Just during the competition, yeah.
Yeah,
one other
he could
question.
change his opinion during the competition, yes. Go ahead.
Stephanie, just one other thing, because you just sort of laid out pretty emotionally, frankly, about what it takes to do this sport, the risks involved, the ability to get into an Ivy League, the costs involved, and that's sort of the motivating factor why other women have not yet stepped forward. They've just sort of privately told you this. We've seen this. Riley Gaines was the only voice for quite some time in women's swimming until multiple people then said, okay, we're going to follow her lead. So I got to ask you, given the risks, given the costs, given all of that you just laid out, why did you do this? Why did you risk all of that to do this? You could have just kept your mouth shut, lost the match, and kept your head down.
Because I'm tired of waking up angry every single morning about this. I mean, I hear it and I see it, and there are girls who have to deal with this every single day, and they go home crying. And I'm tired of this being some sort of theoretical exercise for people who don't believe that this is happening. And I wanted to put it in their face. This is happening, and I'm tired of it, and it's time to stop. And I just...
Yeah, I want to point out that about 50 years ago, Rosa Parks would have said the exact same thing about taking a stand.
Yes.
And she would have been celebrated across the board. We celebrate you, and we hope the folks at CBS News will have you on to celebrate you, too, and tell your story. Stephanie Turner, thank you so much.
Thank
and I'm
you,
glad
Stephanie.
you did this right
Thank
in our
you for
backyard
having
here in the
me.
nation's capital.
I'm
You
actually
bet. And
from
we're big fans of fencing now, but just not very
Great.
big fans of the USA Fencing Association. They got to clean up their act.
Yeah.
It is 7:47. I love talking to courageous, heroic, impressive people.
It's
Do things
wonderful.
like that. It's humbling.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Any frequent listener of this program knows my love for celebrity podcasts, because there's nothing better than an amateur making millions of dollars doing what we do professionally for about $1.50.
Yes.
So, Michelle Obama's podcast is one of our favorites. We've been pointing out that she seems to be sort of exercising her marriage demons here. It's sort of like an open sort of marriage therapy without Barack sitting across from her. Earlier this week, she said this on her podcast about her husband.
Would you be attracted to a guy who's not financially sound when you meet him?
I married one.
Don't you like that alley-oop I just threw you?
That, by the way, the very feminine voice in this podcast is her brother, by the way, I wanted to point out. So there's that. I married Barack, and he didn't have a dime to his name. Now listen to this one. Michelle Obama, with her braids coiled up like she's wearing Mickey Mouse ears, says this.
Men, sometimes I think they're maybe a little bit too visual. I think there are a lot of women who are open to a lot of different kind of men and a lot of different kind of lifestyles. Women want a partner.
Wait a minute. Patrice, there are a lot of rumors about these two, and a lot of rumors about Barack Obama and, well, maybe some open lifestyles he's interested in. What do you make of this, Patrice?
One, I don't think this is therapy. I think this is seeding the ground for when they get divorced. So we already know the issues that have been bubbling up. Number two, and I saw this podcast and I replied, I totally disagree with her on that part that women are more open to different types of men and lifestyles. Maybe lifestyles. Men, no. If you watch the show Pop the Balloon, it has become a cultural sensation where it is like a lineup of men and one single woman, or vice versa. In every episode, all of the women are super, super picky. They will pick on a guy's shoes, a guy's haircut, not a guy's character. Whereas the men, they will give women of different shapes and sizes, generally, a little bit more leeway. They're willing to go off script a little bit. They're willing to say, oh, I'm willing to work with that. So I totally disagree. And I will I'm not going to put all of my friends on blast, but I will just say women tend to be very picky when it comes to who they want to marry. So I disagree with her.
Okay, but a men's perspective here, I think you're right about women there, except that there is one thing in common that women are always attracted to in a man, and it's in his pants. And I'm talking, of course, about his wallet. Yes, that's correct. It is 7:50.